Standing in my son's yard, I heard, "Why is he even still alive?" My name is Harold Anderson, and I'm 72 years old. I'd come to my son's house for what I thought was a friendly visit. Instead, I was standing in his backyard, listening to him, his girlfriend, and her brother discuss my future like I was already dead. They weren't talking about my health. They were talking about my money. I could have left. I should have left. But something in me, maybe stubbornness, maybe survival instinct, made me stay and listen. What I heard next changed everything. And what I did about it, well, that's why you're listening to this story. If you're watching this, please subscribe and let me know where you are watching from. I'd love to hear if this story resonates with anyone else who's faced something similar. But first, let me tell you how a 72-year-old retired engineer systematically erased his own son from his life, legally, quietly, and completely, without ever raising his voice. It started with me not walking away. "Dad's getting worse," Chris was saying to his girlfriend Vicky. "Yesterday he forgot to take his heart medication again." That was a lie. I take my pills every morning at 7 sharp. Have for 3 years running. "And did you see how he struggled with the TV remote last week?" Vicky added, her voice dripping with fake concern. Another lie. I'd helped Chris's neighbor fix his satellite dish that same day. They were building a case, a medical case, against me. Sam, Vicky's brother, cleared his throat. "Golden Years Assisted Living has an opening. Premium care, 24/7 monitoring." "How much?" Chris asked. "But $4,800 a month. But with his pension and the house equity," I felt my car keys grow slick in my palm. My pulse hammered against my collar, but I kept my breathing steady. Controlled. These weren't concerned family members. These were scavengers. I walked through Chris's back door like I'd heard nothing, put on my best confused old man smile. "There you are, Dad." Chris jumped up, suddenly the loving son. "We were just talking about you. All good things, I hope." I accepted the hug, counted his heartbeats against my chest. Fast, guilty. Vicky handed me a glossy brochure. "We found this wonderful place that specializes in senior care." I looked at the smiling faces on the cover. Golden Years Assisted Living. "I'll think about it," I told them. But I was already thinking about something else entirely. The next Sunday, Chris invited me for dinner. Family time, he called it. I should have known it was an ambush. Sam was already there when I arrived, sitting at Chris's kitchen table like he belonged. Vicky bustled around the kitchen, playing housewife. And my grandson Ethan, Chris's 14-year-old son, sat quietly in the corner, earbuds in, but I caught him watching everything. "Dad, sit here." Chris guided me to the head of the table, made it feel like an honor. "Sam's got some great insights about senior living options." Sam leaned forward, all business. "Harold, my mother transitioned to assisted living last year. Best decision she ever made. Transitioned. Like I was a piece of equipment being decommissioned. I cut into my barbecue methodically. The knife made clean, precise lines through the meat." "What kind of insights, Sam?" "Well, for starters, the medical supervision. Someone monitoring your medications, your vitals. No more worrying about missed doses or emergency situations." Chris nodded enthusiastically. "Dad, remember last month when you called me about chest pains? If you'd been at Golden Years, they would have handled it immediately." I paused mid-chew. "I had heartburn from your mother's anniversary. You told me to take antacids." "Exactly my point," Sam jumped in. "Medical professionals would have known the difference." The manipulation was so smooth, so practiced, I almost admired it. Almost. Vicky set down a pitcher of iced tea. Golden Years has a wonderful community feel. Game nights, book clubs, field trips. Sounds like summer camp for the dying, I said quietly. The table went silent. Ethan looked up from his phone, met my eyes briefly, then looked away. But not before I saw something there. Recognition. Maybe even alliance. "Dad," Chris's voice carried that patient tone people use with children and mental patients. "You're not dying, you're just getting older. We want to make sure you're safe." Safe from what? From being alone, from accidents, from, he gestured vaguely, declining. I set down my fork with deliberate care. "I see." Sam must have taken that as encouragement. "The financial aspect is straightforward. Your pension covers most of it. The house sale would handle the rest, plus leave a nice buffer for extras." "The house sale? Well, you wouldn't need it anymore. And honestly, Harold, that place is getting too big for you. Too much maintenance. I'd built that house 43 years ago, wired every outlet, laid every tile in the master bathroom, planted the pecan tree in the backyard that now shaded half the property. Chris reached across the table, covered my hand with his. Dad, we just want what's best for you. Under the table, something crinkled against my leg. I looked down. Ethan had dropped a napkin. Written on it in careful letters, "They lie." I palmed the napkin, looked at my grandson. He was staring at his plate, but his ears were red. "You know what?" I said, standing slowly. "I think I need some time to process all this wonderful advice." "Of course, Dad. Take all the time you need." But as I walked to my car, I heard Sam's voice drift through the open window. "How long do you think he's got before we can move forward anyway?" I sat in my driveway for 20 minutes after I got home, thinking, planning. Then I went inside and started making phone calls. I've always been methodical. 40 years as a mechanical engineer taught me that problems have solutions, but first you need to understand the scope of the problem. I started with Golden Years Assisted Living. Their website was slick. Professional photography, testimonials from grateful families, detailed floor plans. I called their admissions office. "We'd be delighted to schedule a tour," the receptionist chirped. "Are you calling for yourself or a family member?" "My son mentioned you might have an opening." "Oh, wonderful. What's the name?" "Anderson. Harold Anderson." I heard keyboard clicking. "Yes, here it is. Your son Christopher submitted a preliminary inquiry 3 weeks ago. He mentioned some concerns about your current living situation." 3 weeks. Before the barbecue conversation, before the family dinner. They'd been planning this for weeks. "What kind of concerns?" I asked. "Let me see. Medication management issues, recent confusion episodes, safety concerns due to isolation, standard pre-assessment items. When would you like to schedule your evaluation?" I hung up. Next, I went to my bedroom safe. I keep important documents there. Birth certificate, military service records, insurance policies, but also Chris's old school papers, baby photos, report cards, the accumulation of a father's love. At the bottom of the stack, I found something that didn't belong. A manila folder, thin, tucked behind my life insurance policy. Inside, photocopies of my medical records, bank statements, and a partially completed power of attorney form. The signature line was blank, but everything else was filled out. Christopher Michael Anderson, primary agent. Victoria Elena Martinez, secondary agent. My hands didn't shake. That surprised me. I photographed every page with my phone, then returned the folder exactly as I'd found it. Evidence preservation, my engineering mind noted. Document the problem before you solve it. My phone rang. Dr. Patricia Walsh's office. "Mr. Anderson, this is Sarah from Dr. Walsh's office. Your son called yesterday asking about your recent memory assessment results." "What memory assessment?" "Oh, he said you'd been having some cognitive issues and wanted to know if we'd noticed anything during your last visit." "And what did you tell him?" "I told him we couldn't discuss your medical information without your written consent. He asked how he could get that consent." I sat down heavily. "What did you tell him then?" "I explained our HIPAA procedures. Mr. Anderson, is everything all right?" "Sarah, I need to ask you something important. In your opinion, base it on my last 3 visits, do I show any signs of cognitive decline?" "Sir, you solved the crossword puzzle in our waiting room last month, while simultaneously helping another patient figure out their insurance copay. You're sharper than men half your age." "I need that in writing." "I'm sorry? I need Dr. Walsh to document my mental competency, officially. Can you schedule me for a comprehensive evaluation?" Silence. Then, "Mr. Anderson, are you in some kind of trouble?" The funny thing about trouble is that it often looks like love. It comes to Sunday dinner. It brings brochures. It says at once what's best for you. Not trouble, Sarah. Just being careful. After I hung up, I sat in my kitchen with a cup of coffee and looked at the photos on my phone. My medical records, my bank statements, my life, reduced to documents in a folder. Chris had left his jacket here last Sunday. I found it hanging in my hall closet. In the inner pocket, a business card from Meridian Legal Services. Elder law specialists. Guardianship and conservatorship proceedings. On the back, handwritten, Harold Anderson, initial consultation 8:15, Bring medical documentation. Today was August 12th. I had 3 days. Dr. Patricia Walsh had been my physician for 20 years. She'd seen me through my wife's cancer, my heart attack at 68, and my recovery from both. If anyone knew my mind, it was Pat. "Hal," she said, reviewing my test results, "your cognitive function is excellent. Your memory, reasoning, and decision-making abilities are all within normal ranges for your age group. Better than normal, actually." I was sitting in her office at 8:30 Monday morning, having requested the earliest appointment. "I need that documented, Pat. Officially." She leaned back in her chair, studying me. "This is about Chris's call, isn't it?" "What exactly did he ask?" "He wanted to know if you'd shown signs of dementia, confusion, or impaired judgment. He seemed particularly interested in whether you were capable of making financial decisions." "And?" "I told him I couldn't discuss your medical information. But Hal, I'm concerned. This kind of inquiry usually means someone's considering guardianship proceedings." I pulled out my phone, showed her the photos of the POA documents. "They are." Pat's expression darkened as she scrolled through the images. "When was this prepared?" 3 weeks ago, apparently. I need your help, Pat." "What kind of help?" "Legal documentation of my competency, something that would stop a guardianship petition cold." She was quiet for a long moment. "Hal, I've known you for 20 years. You're one of the most mentally sharp patients I have. But I have to ask, is this really about protecting yourself? Or are you just angry at Chris?" "Both," I said, "but mostly the first." She nodded slowly. "I can prepare a comprehensive mental status evaluation, cognitive testing, psychological assessment, the works. But Hal, you should also talk to a lawyer." "I already called one." Jonathan Hughes had been my study partner at UT Engineering back in 1973. We'd kept in touch over the years, holiday cards and the occasional beer when he was in Austin. After graduation, he'd switched to law school, specialized in elder law. If anyone could help me, it was Jonathan. I met him at his office at 2 that afternoon. "Jesus, Hal," he said, reviewing the documents I'd brought. "They're not messing around. This POA would give them complete control over your finances, medical decisions, living arrangements, everything." "Can they do it?" "They can try." Texas law allows adult children to petition for guardianship if they can demonstrate that their parent lacks the capacity to make important decisions. But Hal, you'd have to be pretty far gone for a court to grant that. "What if they lie?" "That's harder. They'd need medical evidence, testimony from healthcare providers, documentation of incidents. But," he hesitated, "but what?" "With enough preparation, enough manufactured evidence, enough witnesses saying you're confused or declining, it's possible, especially if you don't have good legal representation." I leaned forward. "What would you recommend?" Jonathan opened his laptop. "Defense in depth. First, we document your competency extensively. Medical evaluations, cognitive testing, financial literacy assessments. Second, we create legal structures that make guardianship unnecessary and difficult. Third, we prepare counter-evidence for anything they might claim. How long does this take? If we move fast, 2 weeks for the basic protections, a month for the comprehensive defense." "I might not have a month." He looked at me seriously. "Then we start today." "Hal, I have to ask, are you sure about this? Once we start this process, it's going to create a permanent rift with Chris." I thought about the barbecue conversation, the lies about my medication, the folder hidden in my safe, Ethan's note under the table. "Jonathan, the rift already exists. I'm just making it official." We spent the next 3 hours setting up what Jonathan called my legal firewall. Revocable living trust, medical directives, financial power of attorney, assigned to Jonathan himself as backup, and a series of competency evaluations. "One more thing," I said as we finished. "If they try to file guardianship papers, how much notice do I get?" "You'd be served with papers, probably get a hearing date within 30 days. And if I'm prepared?" "If you're prepared and you can demonstrate clear mental competency and you have good legal representation," he smiled grimly, "they'll get laughed out of court." I shook his hand. "Then let's make sure I'm prepared." Walking to my car, I felt something I hadn't felt in weeks. Control. I've always been a practical man. When my wife was dying, I learned to cook. When I had my heart attack, I learned about nutrition and exercise. When Chris started planning to control my life, I learned to control his access to information. Starting Tuesday, I began what I called strategic opacity. Chris called that evening. "Dad, how are you feeling? You seemed a little off at dinner Sunday." "Oh, some days are better than others." It wasn't a lie, exactly, just incomplete truth. "Are you taking your medications regularly?" I try to remember. I was looking at my pill organizer as I said it. Every compartment filled exactly as prescribed. Sometimes I get confused about whether I've taken them or not. I heard him breathe in sharply. "Dad, that's exactly what we were talking about. Maybe we should look into that medication management system at Golden Years." Maybe. I walked to my kitchen window, looked out at the pecan tree I'd planted when Chris was 5. 40 years of growth, now taller than my house. "Chris, do you remember when we planted this pecan tree together?" Vaguely. Dad, about those medications. You said it would never grow. Said pecans don't grow in clay soil." "Dad, I think we should schedule another visit with Dr. Walsh." "You were wrong about the tree," I said quietly. "It grew just fine." After I hung up, I walked outside and collected a handful of pecans from under the tree. In the kitchen, I cracked them methodically, thinking about patience and time and things that grow slowly in difficult soil. The next morning, I found a gift basket on my front porch. Gourmet foods, expensive chocolates. A card from Chris and Vicky. "Thinking of you, love, Chris and V." Beautiful presentation. Thoughtful gesture. Except for one thing. I've been working with electronic systems for 40 years. I know what a GPS tracker looks like. This one was hidden in the bottom of the basket, taped under the decorative paper lining. Small, black, professional grade. The kind security companies use to track vehicles. They weren't just planning to control my future. They were monitoring my present. I left the tracker where it was, but photographed it from every angle. Then I loaded the entire basket into my car and drove to the Austin Police Department. "I'd like to report harassment through electronic surveillance," I told the desk sergeant. 20 minutes later, I had a police report documenting the tracker. The officer, a young woman named Martinez, was very thorough. "Mr. Anderson, this is illegal in Texas without consent. Do you want to press charges?" "Not yet, but I want this documented." "Smart. Keep the tracker where it is for now. If they're monitoring you, let them see normal patterns while you decide what to do." Driving home, I felt oddly grateful to Chris. He just handed me evidence of criminal activity. That evening, I made pecan pie from the nuts I'd gathered, my wife's recipe. As it baked, filling the house with the smell of cinnamon and butter, I called Ethan. "Grandpa?" "Hello, son. I was wondering if you'd like to come help me with a project this weekend." "What kind of project?" "The kind that might teach you something important about family." George Thompson had lived next door for 15 years. Retired Austin police detective, 71 years old, and the most observant man I've ever known. If you wanted to understand what was happening in the neighborhood, you asked George. Thursday afternoon, I found him on his front porch with a glass of iced tea. "Mind if I join you?" I asked. "Course not. You want some tea?" We sat in comfortable silence for a few minutes, watching the world go by. George had that cop quality of seeing everything without seeming to look at anything. "Hal," he said finally, "I've noticed some unusual activity around your place lately." "What kind of activity?" "Well, that Golden Years van parked across the street Tuesday. Driver sat there for about an hour, taking notes. Then yesterday, your son Chris walked around your house twice, trying windows, checking your garage door." I felt my chest tighten. "You sure it was Chris?" "Positive. I came over to ask if everything was okay, but he said you'd asked him to check your security while you were out. Except your car was in the driveway." George took a long sip of tea. "Hal, you been having any problems lately?" I told him everything. The overheard conversation, the POA documents, the tracker in the gift basket, the guardianship consultation. George listened without interrupting, his face getting more serious with each detail. "Son of a bitch," he said when I finished. "Sorry, Hal, but that's what this is. Elder financial abuse with a side of fraud." "What would you do?" "Exactly what you're doing. Document everything, get ahead of it legally, and build a witness base." He leaned forward. "Hal, I've seen this before. Usually starts with isolated incidents. Checking on Dad, bringing groceries, helping with bills. Then gradually increases until the senior citizen signs over everything and moves into some facility." "How often does it work?" Too often, especially when the adult children present a unified front and the senior is isolated. He studied me carefully. You're not isolated, though. Not anymore. I'd like to help, if you'll let me. I've got connections at Adult Protective Services, the DA's office, and the State Attorney General's Elder Abuse Unit. Plus, I've got nothing but time and a strong dislike for people who prey on seniors. What kind of help? Surveillance documentation. If they're planning something, they'll need to gather evidence of your supposed incompetence. I can watch for that, photograph it, document their activities. Also, I can serve as a character witness if this goes to court. George drained his tea glass. One more thing, Hal. You need to be very careful about isolation tactics. They're going to try to limit your contact with friends, neighbors, healthcare providers, anyone who might contradict their narrative. How do I counter that? Stay visible. Stay social. Make sure people see you regularly, functioning normally. Church, grocery store, coffee shop, wherever you normally go. The more witnesses you have to your competency, the harder their case becomes. That evening, I called my neighbor across the street, my barber, and the manager at my bank. Casual conversations, but I made sure each one involved demonstrating my mental sharpness, discussing current events, planning future appointments, handling complex transactions. George was right. Visibility was protection. Friday morning, I began what Jonathan called Operation Legal Fortress. First stop, Jonathan's office, where I revoked every existing power of attorney and healthcare directive I'd ever signed. This is important, Hal, Jonathan explained as I signed document after document. Texas law requires that revocation be done formally and distributed to all relevant parties. We're doing this by certified mail to Chris, to your bank, to your doctors, to anyone who might have copies of the old documents. The new power of attorney was different. Instead of one person having complete control, it required dual signatures, Jonathan's and mine, for any major financial decisions. For healthcare decisions, I designated Dr. Walsh as my primary agent, with Jonathan as backup. What this means, Jonathan said, is that even if someone claims you're incompetent, they can't act unilaterally. They'd have to convince two independent professionals, both with fiduciary duties to you. Next, we set up what Jonathan called an irrevocable living trust. It sounds complicated, but the concept is simple. My assets go into a trust that I control while I'm alive and competent, but that can't be altered by guardianship proceedings. The beauty of this, Jonathan explained, is that guardianship only gives someone control over your personal assets. Assets in an irrevocable trust aren't considered personal assets. What about my house? That's the clever part. The house transfers to the trust, but you retain a life estate. You can live there as long as you want, make modifications, even sell it if you choose, but no one can force you out or sell it against your will. The beneficiary of the trust was Ethan. If something happened to me, everything would go to him at age 25, with Jonathan as trustee until then. Won't Chris challenge this? I asked. He can try, but Texas law strongly favors clearly expressed wishes made while the person is competent. We've got Dr. Walsh's evaluation, our own competency assessment, and multiple witnesses to your decision-making process. The banking changes were next. I moved my primary accounts to a different bank entirely, Austin Community Bank, where I'd never done business before. This eliminated Chris's familiarity with my financial routines and any informal access he might have gained over the years. The new accounts required dual signature for any transaction over $500, photo ID for all in-person transactions, and verbal confirmation of my identity for phone transactions. Mr. Anderson, the banker explained, these are unusual security measures. Are you expecting some kind of problem? I'm preventing some kind of problem, I corrected. We also set up what she called a duress protocol. If anyone tried to coerce me into authorizing transactions, I could use a code phrase that would immediately freeze my accounts and trigger a call to Jonathan. The medical directives were equally thorough. Dr. Walsh prepared a comprehensive advance directive that specifically stated my wishes about end-of-life care, medical decision-making, and living arrangements. Most importantly, it included a clear statement that I did not want to be placed in any care facility against my will unless I was medically incapacitated. This directive, Dr. Walsh explained, has to be honored by any medical facility in Texas. It's legally binding and can only be overruled by a court order. The final step was creating what Jonathan called evidence packages, and we prepared sealed envelopes containing copies of all documentation, witness statements, and competency evaluations. One went to Jonathan's law firm safe, one to my bank's safe deposit box, and one to Dr. Walsh's office. If anyone tries to claim you're incompetent, Jonathan said, we can immediately produce comprehensive evidence to the contrary. By 5 o'clock Friday, I was legally bulletproof. My assets were protected, my medical wishes were documented, and my competency was established by multiple professionals. Jonathan walked me to my car. Hal, I have to ask, how do you feel about all this? I thought about the question. Like I just took my life back. Good, because starting Monday, they're going to realize something's changed. That's when things might get interesting. Driving home, I felt something I hadn't felt since overhearing that conversation in Chris's backyard. Peace. Saturday morning, I changed every lock in my house. The locksmith, a young man named Tyler, was thorough and professional. Mr. Anderson, these are commercial-grade deadbolts. The keys can't be duplicated without proper authorization, and the locks are pick-resistant. How pick-resistant? Let me put it this way. If someone gets through these locks, they're either a professional burglar or they used explosives. I had him install new locks on the front door, back door, garage service door, and garage overhead door. The total cost was $800, worth every penny. One more thing, I told Tyler. Can you install a security system? I can recommend someone. But Mr. Anderson, may I ask why you need this level of security? This is usually the kind of setup we do for domestic violence situations. Smart kid. Something like that, I said. The security system installer arrived that afternoon. Motion sensors, door and window alarms, cameras covering all entrances, and a monitoring service that would call police automatically if the system was breached. The beauty of this system, the installer explained, is that it has cellular backup. Even if someone cuts your phone lines or internet, it still works. While he worked, I drove to the post office and set up a new P.O. box. Starting Monday, all my mail would go there instead of my house. No more opportunity for Chris to intercept bank statements, legal documents, or medical correspondence. We'll need 2 forms of ID and a utility bill to establish the box, the postal clerk explained. What about mail forwarding? We can set that up. All mail to your home address will automatically forward to the P.O. box. The service lasts for 1 year, renewable. Next stop, my cell phone carrier. I upgraded to a new phone with enhanced security features and changed my number. The old number would forward to the new one for 30 days, giving me time to notify important contacts. Mr. Anderson, the sales representative asked, are you sure you want to change your number? You've had the same one for 15 years. I'm sure. The phone upgrade included features I hadn't known existed. Location tracking that I could control, encrypted messaging, and remote wipe capability if the phone was stolen. These security features, the rep explained, are usually requested by business executives or people with privacy concerns. I have privacy concerns. My final stop was Austin Community Bank to set up online banking with military-grade security protocols. 2-factor authentication, transaction alerts sent to my new phone number, and daily account monitoring. Mr. Anderson, the banker asked, would you like us to send account alerts to any family members? No family members, just me. Sunday afternoon, I tested all the new systems. The security cameras gave me clear views of my entire property. The motion sensors detected movement 20 feet from any entrance. The door alarms were loud enough to wake the neighborhood. I called the monitoring service to test their response time. Austin Security Services, this is Janet. We're showing an alarm at 1247 Pecan Grove Lane. Are you okay, Mr. Anderson? This is Harold Anderson. I'm testing the system. Thank you, sir. For testing purposes, we would have dispatched police within 60 seconds of the alarm. Is there anything else we can help you with? Yes, what happens if someone claims to be my son and asks you to disarm the system? Sir, only authorized users on your account can make changes. You've listed yourself as the only authorized user. No one else can disarm your system or access your account information. Perfect. That evening, I sat on my back porch with a cup of coffee, watching the sunset through the pecan tree branches. My property was secure. My finances were protected. My medical wishes were documented. My communications were private. For the first time in weeks, I felt like the house was truly mine again. George appeared at the fence line. Hal, I noticed some activity over here today. Everything okay? Everything's fine, George. Just making some improvements. Good. Because I also noticed Chris drove by twice this afternoon. Slow passes, looking at your house. Did he stop? No, but he tried his key on your front door around 6:30. Didn't work, obviously. He seemed pretty frustrated. I smiled. I imagine he was. Hal, you should know, tomorrow's probably going to be interesting. He was right. Monday morning, the certified mail deliveries began. At 9:15, Chris received formal notification that all previous powers of attorney had been revoked. At 9:30, Golden Years Assisted Living received notification that they had no authorization to discuss my case with anyone except me. At 9:45, my former bank received notification that I'd moved all my accounts and they should not provide any information about my finances to anyone. I know this because Jonathan's office tracked every delivery. At 10:30, my phone rang. Dad, what the hell is going on? Chris's voice was tight with anger. Good morning, Chris. How are you? I just got some legal papers saying you've revoked my power of attorney. When did you do that? Why didn't you tell me? I made some changes to my legal arrangements. Is there a problem? A problem? Dad, I was trying to help you. Vicky and I spent hours researching the best care options, and now you're acting like we're criminals or something. Interesting, he was going straight to offense instead of asking why I'd made the changes. A guilty conscience, my engineering mind noted. Chris, can I ask you something? When you took me to dinner last Sunday, had you already decided I needed to go to assisted living? Silence. Then, we were concerned about your welfare. That's not what I asked. Dad, you're not thinking clearly about this. You need help, and we're trying to provide it. Help with what specifically? Your medications, your safety, your decision-making? My decision-making seems fine. I just made several important decisions about my legal and financial arrangements. That's exactly what I'm talking about. Making major changes without consulting family is not normal behavior. I walked to my kitchen window, looked out at the pecan tree. 40 years of growth, strong and independent. Chris, who do you think should make decisions about my life? Well, family should be involved. People who care about you. And if I disagree with their decisions? Dad, that's why there are legal mechanisms to protect seniors who can't protect themselves. There it was, the threat, delivered with concern and love, but unmistakably a threat. Chris, I've been protecting myself just fine for 72 years. I don't need legal mechanisms. Dad, I think you should talk to someone. A counselor, maybe. This paranoid behavior isn't like you. Paranoid. Classic gaslighting terminology. What would you consider normal behavior, Chris? Trusting your family, accepting help when you need it, not making major life changes without input from people who love you. I see. And if I continue this paranoid behavior? Dad, I hope it doesn't come to that. But there are options for families dealing with senior citizens who can't make rational decisions anymore. After I hung up, I called Jonathan immediately. He just threatened guardianship proceedings, I reported. Expected. How did you respond? I stayed calm, asked questions, let him reveal his intentions. Perfect. Did you record the conversation? Should I have? Texas is a one-party consent state. You can record any conversation you're part of without informing the other party. From now on, I recommend recording all interactions with Chris, Vicky, or Sam. How? Your new phone has a voice recording app. I'll walk you through setting it up. 20 minutes later, I had a digital recording system that would capture any conversation I initiated or received. The recordings would automatically upload to a secure cloud server that only Jonathan and I could access. At 2 o'clock, Dr. Walsh called. Hal, I just received the strangest call. Someone claiming to be your son asked for copies of your medical records. When I explained HIPAA requirements, he suggested I might need to consult with his attorney about your mental competency. What did you tell him? I told him to have his attorney contact my office directly. But Hal, this sounds like preparation for some kind of legal action. It is. Pat, I need you to prepare one more document. What kind of document? A comprehensive statement of my mental competency, specifically addressing any claims that I'm incapable of making financial or medical decisions. Something detailed enough to stop guardianship proceedings. I can do that. But Hal, I should warn you, if this goes to court, they might request an independent psychological evaluation. Would that be a problem? For you? Not at all. You'd pass any competence evaluation easily, but it would delay things, create additional legal expenses, and give them more opportunities to build their case. That afternoon, Jonathan's office prepared what he called sealed evidence packages. Each package contained Dr. Walsh's competency evaluation, my cognitive test results, financial literacy assessment scores, character reference letters from George, my barber, my former colleagues, documentation of my recent legal changes, photos and police reports about the GPS tracker, recorded conversations with Chris. These packages, Jonathan explained, go to 3 locations: my office safe, the county courthouse clerk, and Judge Patricia Morrison's chambers. Why Judge Morrison? She handles guardianship cases in Travis County. If Chris files a petition, it'll likely go to her court. This way, she'll have immediate access to evidence of your competency. Is this legal? Perfectly legal. We're not ex parte communication. We're providing evidence that might be relevant to future proceedings. It's proactive legal defense. By 5 o'clock Monday, I was not just legally protected. I was legally armed. The fortress was complete. Tuesday afternoon, Chris came to my house. I watched him on the security monitor as he approached the front door. He looked frustrated, determined, and slightly desperate. He tried his old key first, then rang the doorbell. I activated the intercom system. Hi, Chris. Dad, I need to talk to you. Can you let me in? We can talk like this. Dad, this is ridiculous. I'm your son. Why won't you let me in your own house? Because it's my house, and I choose who enters it. I could see him on the monitor, running his hand through his hair, looking around the neighborhood, probably hoping no one was watching this public rejection. Dad, Vicky and I are worried about you. These changes you've made, the locks, the lawyers, the bank accounts, they're not normal. They're not normal for you, I corrected. They're perfectly normal for someone protecting their autonomy. Protecting from what? We're your family. Chris, let me ask you something. Last month, when you asked Dr. Walsh about my mental competency, were you planning to use that information to help me or to control me? Silence on the intercom. On the monitor, I watched his face cycle through surprise, guilt, and anger. Dad, I don't know what you think you heard, but I didn't hear anything from Dr. Walsh. I heard it from you. At your house, in your backyard, when you thought I wasn't listening. More silence. Then that. Dad, you're taking that conversation out of context. What's the proper context for discussing why I'm still alive? We weren't... Dad, you don't understand. We were talking about quality of life, about what's best for everyone involved. Everyone involved, meaning you, Vicky, and Sam. Meaning the family. Dad, you can't live alone forever. You're 72 years old. What happens if you fall? What happens if you have another heart episode? What happens is my business, Chris. My life, my risks, my choices. But what about our responsibilities? What about what we'll have to deal with if something goes wrong? There it was. The truth, finally. This wasn't about my welfare. It was about their convenience. Chris, you don't have any responsibilities you don't choose to accept. I never asked you to manage my life. Someone has to. Dad, you're being stubborn and unrealistic. People your age need help, whether they want to admit it or not. I looked at my pocket watch, a gift from my father when I graduated college, 3:15 in the afternoon. Chris, how long have you been planning to put me in assisted living? We weren't planning anything. We were exploring options in case the inquiry at Golden Years was made 3 weeks ago. The POA documents were prepared 2 weeks ago. Your consultation with the guardianship attorney is scheduled for this Thursday. I heard him breathing hard through the intercom. How do you know about that? I know because I'm not the confused old man you think I am. Dad, listen to me. If you don't start acting reasonably about this, we might have to pursue legal options. I don't want to, but if you're not capable of making good decisions anymore... Are you threatening me, Chris? I'm trying to protect you. From what? From yourself. From making mistakes that could hurt you. I was quiet for a long moment, watching my son on the security monitor. He looked young suddenly and scared, and completely unprepared for a father who wouldn't cooperate with his plans. Chris, I've made a lot of decisions in my life. I chose my career, chose your mother, chose to have children, chose how to raise you. Some of those decisions worked out well, some didn't, but they were my decisions to make. Dad, I'm not finished. I'm going to keep making my own decisions until the day I die. If you can't accept that, then you need to decide what kind of relationship we're going to have going forward. Dad, please, just let me in. We can talk about this. We are talking about this. The difference is, now it's on my terms. I watched him stand there for another minute, then walk back to his car. He sat in the driveway for 10 minutes before driving away. That evening, George came over. Interesting conversation, he said. You heard it? Hard not to. Your intercom carries pretty well. He smiled. Sounded like you handled it well. We'll see. Section 12, Confrontation 2, The Mediator's Manipulation, 480p says to you. Wednesday morning, Vicky came alone. I was watering my pecan tree when she arrived, moving with deliberate calm, letting her know I'd seen her, but wasn't hurrying to accommodate her presence. Harold, she called from the gate, could we talk? We're talking. She approached slowly, hands visible, body language carefully non-threatening. I think there's been a misunderstanding. What kind of misunderstanding? Chris is upset. He feels like you don't trust him anymore. I continued watering the tree, the flow steady and purposeful. Trust is earned, Vicky. It's also lost. Harold, I know you overheard our conversation last Sunday, but you didn't hear the whole thing. What part did I miss? The part where we talked about how much we love you. The part where Chris said he'd rather take care of you himself than put you in any facility. Interesting approach. Reframe the narrative. Introduce information I couldn't verify. Appeal to family sentiment. And what changed his mind? Nothing changed his mind. We're still exploring all options. Golden Years was just research. Due diligence. I turned off the water, coiled the hose with methodical precision. Vicky, how long have you worked in senior care? She hesitated. I used to work at Sunset Manor. Why? Used to? I left that position 6 months ago. Why did you leave? Personal reasons. I set down the hose, looked at her directly. What were those personal reasons? Harold, I don't think that's relevant to... Everything about your qualifications to advise me about senior care is relevant. She was quiet for a moment. There was a disagreement about patient care protocols. What kind of disagreement? Harold, this isn't about me. This is about you and Chris and your family. Answer the question, Vicky. I was terminated for allegedly influencing a patient's family to move financial assets before admission. There it was. The admission I'd been waiting for. Allegedly? The allegations were false, but the facility has strict policies about staff involvement in resident financial decisions. I walked to my back porch, sat down in the wooden chair I'd made 30 years ago. Vicky, let me ask you something. In your professional opinion, do I need assisted living care? Well, that's not really for me to judge. In your professional opinion. Harold, senior living isn't just about medical needs. It's about community, safety, convenience. Do I need assisted living care? No, she said quietly. Not medically. But Harold, there are other considerations. Such as? Financial management? Legal planning? End-of-life preparation? And you think Chris is qualified to handle those things for me? I think Chris loves you and wants what's best for you. That's not what I asked. She was quiet for a long moment, standing in my backyard, surrounded by 40 years of my labor and planning and growth. Harold, I'm going to be honest with you. Chris has some financial problems. The real estate market has been difficult, and he's made some investment mistakes. How much does he owe? That's not my place to say. How much, Vicky? About $240,000. I nodded slowly. And my house is worth how much? Harold, it's not like that. It's exactly like that. I stood up, looked at her steadily. Vicky, I want you to listen carefully to what I'm about to say. She nodded. I don't erase you. I don't erase Chris. I choose me. Section 13. The Grandson's Truth. 6:42. Thursday afternoon, Ethan came to my house alone, riding his bicycle. I watched him through the security monitor as he approached my front door. 14 years old, all elbows and knees, but with his grandmother's intelligent eyes and his grandfather's stubborn jaw. He knocked instead of ringing the doorbell.
Grandpa, it's Ethan. I opened the door, really looked at him for the first time in weeks. He'd grown since the family dinner. His voice was changing, his shoulders broader. Almost a man, but still my grandson. Hello, son, come in. He parked his bike carefully on my front porch, wiped his feet before entering. Good manners, taught by someone who cared about such things. Grandpa, I need to tell you something. We sat in my living room, the afternoon light slanting through windows I'd installed myself 40 years ago. What do you need to tell me? I heard them. Dad and Vicky and Uncle Sam. I heard them talking about you.
What did you hear? He was quiet for a moment, looking at his hands. They said you were getting old and confused. They said you couldn't take care of yourself anymore. They said it would be better if you went to live somewhere where professionals could watch you. What else? Uncle Sam said your house was worth a lot of money. He said if they sold it, they could pay for the assisted living place and still have money left over for Dad's business problems. Did they say anything else? Ethan's voice got very small. They said you probably wouldn't live very long anyway, so it didn't really matter what you wanted. I felt something cold and sharp in my chest. Not surprise. I'd known this was coming, but hearing it from Ethan made it real in a way it hadn't been before. How does that make you feel, son? Mad. Really mad. Grandpa, you're not confused. You're the smartest person I know. You helped me with my algebra homework last month. You fixed my bike when the chain broke. You remember everything about Grandma, and about when Dad was little, and about your job. Thank you, Ethan. They're lying about you, and they made me promise not to tell you what I heard, but that's lying too. I reached over, took his hand in mine. His fingers were long and strong, like his father's had been at that age. Ethan, I need to ask you something important. Do you understand why I changed the locks on my house? Because they were going to try to control you. That's right. And do you understand why I got new lawyers and new bank accounts? Because they were going to try to take your money. Very good. Now I need to ask you something else. If I gave you something important to keep safe, could you do that? He nodded seriously. I went to my bedroom, opened the safe, and pulled out a small wooden box. Inside was my father's pocket watch, the one he'd given me when I graduated college, the one I'd carried every day for 50 years. This belonged to my father, and his father before him. Someday it should belong to you. Ethan's eyes went wide. Grandpa, I can't take this. Dad would... Your father doesn't get to decide this. I do. I placed the watch in his hands, closed his fingers around it. But there's something else. I handed him a sealed envelope. Inside this envelope is information about a trust fund I've set up for you. When you turn 25, you'll have access to money. For college, for starting a business, for buying a house. Whatever you need to build your own life. How much money? Enough, but Ethan, there are conditions. What conditions? You have to finish high school, you have to either go to college or learn a trade. And most importantly, you have to always tell the truth, even when it's difficult. He was quiet for a long moment, holding the watch and the envelope. Grandpa, what's going to happen with Dad? I don't know, son. That depends on what choices he makes. Will I still be able to see you? As long as you want to, and as long as your father allows it. But Ethan, there may come a time when you have to choose between what's easy and what's right. What do you mean? I mean your father might ask you to lie for him. He might ask you to say things about me that aren't true. He might try to make you choose sides. What should I do? Tell the truth. Always tell the truth. Even if it's hard, even if it causes problems, even if people get angry with you. He nodded solemnly. I promise, Grandpa. Good boy. As he prepared to leave, I walked him to the door. Ethan, one more thing. If anything happens to me, if I get sick, if there is an emergency, if your father tries to move me somewhere against my will, you call this number. But I handed him a card with Jonathan's information. Can you remember that? I'll remember. I watched him ride away on his bicycle. My father's watch safe in his pocket. My trust in his integrity, absolute. Some investments pay dividends for generations. Section 14. Intentional Giving and New Beginnings, 642. Friday morning, I began what I called intentional downsizing. For 43 years, I'd accumulated the artifacts of a full life. Tools from my engineering career, furniture chosen with my wife, books collected over decades, photographs documenting family milestones. Time to decide what mattered and what didn't. I started with Chris's childhood belongings, stored in boxes in my garage. Little League trophies, school art projects, model airplanes we'd built together. Once these items represented precious memories. Now they felt like anchors to a relationship that no longer existed. I loaded everything into my truck and drove to Goodwill. "These are donations," I told the volunteer at the drop-off center. "Wonderful. We can provide a tax receipt if you'd like." "That won't be necessary." Watching strangers carry away the physical evidence of Chris's childhood should have felt sad. Instead, it felt like liberation. Next, I tackled my workshop. 40 years of engineering tools, precision instruments, project materials. I kept what I might realistically use and donated the rest to Austin Community College's engineering program. "Mr. Anderson," the department head said when I delivered the tools, "this is incredibly generous. These instruments are worth thousands of dollars. They should go to students who will actually use them. Would you consider teaching a guest lecture about practical engineering applications?" I'd be honored. By afternoon, I was moving through the house systematically. Furniture I'd never liked but had kept for family gatherings. Donated. Books I'd read and wouldn't read again. Donated to the library. Kitchen appliances I'd accumulated but rarely used. Donated to the food bank. The process was methodical, purposeful, and surprisingly energizing. George appeared at my fence line around 4 o'clock. "Hal, you moving out?" "Moving forward," I corrected. "Want some pecan tree seedlings?" I'd been nurturing young pecan trees in pots, planning to transplant them around my property. Now I had a better idea. "I'd love some," George said. "My backyard could use more shade." We spent an hour transplanting seedlings. One for George, one for the family across the street, one for the elderly woman 2 houses down who'd always admired my tree. "These won't produce nuts for 15 years, I told each neighbor. "That's fine," they all said. "We're not going anywhere." Saturday morning, I visited my wife's grave for the first time in months. Margaret Ann Anderson, beloved wife and mother, 1952-2019. I'd been avoiding this place, telling myself I was too busy, too focused on immediate problems. The truth was simpler. I'd been avoiding grief. "Hello, sweetheart," I said, settling onto the stone bench I'd installed beside her headstone. "I'm sorry I haven't been by lately. Things have been complicated." And I told her about Chris, about the guardianship plan, about Ethan and the trust fund, and the legal protections I'd put in place. I told her about changing the locks, and giving away his childhood things, and choosing my own future over his plans. "I think you'd be proud of how I handled it," I said. No shouting, no accusations, no drama, just quiet determination and good planning. A breeze moved through the cemetery oak trees, and for a moment I could smell her perfume. White shoulders, the same scent she'd worn for 30 years. "I'm going to be okay, Margaret. Better than okay. I'm going to be free." Sunday afternoon, I prepared my new routine. Church at First Methodist. Lunch at the diner, where I'd become a regular, grocery shopping at the H-E-B, where the staff knew my name. A schedule that kept me visible, social, and engaged with my community. Dr. Walsh called that evening. "Hal, I wanted to let you know, Chris contacted my office again. This time he brought a lawyer." "What kind of lawyer?" "Elder law attorney. They wanted copies of your medical records and requested an independent psychological evaluation." "What did you tell them?" "I told them they'd need a court order or your written consent. The lawyer mentioned they might be filing for emergency guardianship." "When?" "Soon, I think. Hal, are you prepared for this?" I looked around my living room. Smaller now, simplified, but unmistakably mine. My books, my cha chairs, my photographs, my choices. "I'm prepared." After I hung up, I called Jonathan. "They're moving forward," I reported. "Expected. How do you feel about it?" "Ready." "Good. Because Hal, once they file those papers, everything changes. This becomes a public legal battle." "Will we win?" "We'll win, but winning and being right aren't always the same thing. Are you sure this is how you want it to end?" I thought about Chris as a boy, building model airplanes at my kitchen table. I thought about teaching him to drive, watching him graduate, walking him down the aisle at his wedding. Then I thought about him discussing why I was still alive. "Jonathan, this isn't how I want it to end. This is how Chris chose for it to end." "Understood. We'll be ready." Monday morning, the guardianship papers arrived. Chris had filed a petition claiming I was mentally incompetent and unable to care for myself or manage my financial affairs. The petition requested emergency guardianship with himself as guardian, citing urgent concerns about cognitive decline and unsafe living conditions. I read the document twice, then called Jonathan. They filed, I reported. I know. The court clerk called me an hour ago. Emergency hearing is scheduled for Thursday morning. Are you ready? Hal, we're more than ready. We're armed. Tuesday, I continued my normal routine. Church committee meeting in the morning, lunch with George at the diner, grocery shopping in the afternoon. At each stop, people noticed my calm demeanor, my clear conversation, my obvious competency. Wednesday, Jonathan and I met for final preparation. Hal, tomorrow they're going to paint a picture of a confused, declining old man who can't take care of himself. We're going to paint a different picture. What picture? A competent senior citizen who made informed decisions to protect himself from financial exploitation by family members. Thursday morning I dressed carefully. Navy blue suit, white shirt, the tie Margaret had given me for our 40th anniversary. I looked like what I was, a respectable 72-year-old man in full possession of his faculties. The hearing was in Judge Patricia Morrison's chambers. Chris, Vicky, and their lawyer sat on one side. Jonathan and I sat on the other. The court reporter prepared to document everything. Mr. Anderson, Judge Morrison said, do you understand why we're here today? Yes, Your Honor. My son believes I'm incompetent to manage my own affairs. And what do you believe? I believe I'm competent to make my own decisions, and I've taken legal steps to protect myself from people who disagree with those decisions. Chris's lawyer spent 30 minutes presenting their case. Medical concerns, social isolation, recent erratic behavior, including changing locks and moving bank accounts. Jonathan spent 10 minutes destroying that case. He presented Dr. Walsh's competency evaluation, my cognitive test scores, character references from friends and neighbors, and documentation of my recent legal decisions, all made with professional advice and careful consideration. Then he presented the GPS tracker, the police report, and the recorded conversations. Your Honor, Jonathan said, this isn't about protecting Mr. Anderson from his own poor judgment. This is about protecting him from financial exploitation by family members who need access to his assets. Judge Morrison was quiet for a long moment, reviewing the evidence. Mr. Christopher Anderson, she said finally, do you have any response to these allegations? Chris looked confused, angry, and trapped. Your Honor, I just want what's best for my father. What's best for your father, or what's best for your financial situation? Your Honor, I don't understand. The petition is denied, Judge Morrison announced. Mr. Harold Anderson demonstrates clear competency and has taken reasonable steps to protect his interests. This court finds no evidence of diminished capacity or need for guardianship. Outside the courthouse, Chris tried one last time. Dad, I'm sorry. I thought I was helping. Chris, you thought you were solving your problems by making me into one. What happens now? Now you figure out your own life without using mine as collateral. That evening I sat on my back porch with a glass of iced tea, watching the sunset through my pecan tree. George waved from his yard, where one of my seedlings was already showing new growth. My phone rang. Ethan. Grandpa, I heard about court today. How did you hear about it? Dad told me. He's pretty upset. How do you feel about it? I'm glad you won. Why? Because they asked me why you were still alive, and I know the answer. What's the answer? Because you choose to be. I smiled, feeling the warm Texas air, tasting the sweetness of iced tea, listening to the evening sounds of a neighborhood where I'd lived for 43 years. That's exactly right, son. I choose to be. Some victories aren't about defeating your enemies. They're about defining yourself. I am Harold Anderson. I am 72 years old. I am alive because I choose to live on my terms. And that choice, that fundamental right to self-determination, is something nobody can take away. Not with manipulation, not with legal papers, not with claims of love or family obligation. I choose me, and that's enough.